So Splitgate2 released today, and it's been one of those things that is mired in controversy for all the right but wrong reasons at the same time. So here's what happened. The game came out. Game is fairly well received by people who appreciate that sort of genre, that like that game style, that gameplay. And the game is by all accounts fun to play. However, the game being the BR, especially being a free to play BR, does have MTX, does have that in-game currency and in-game transactions, microtransactions that has become all the norm in video games these days. And one of the things that struck people, in particular, this video by JGod, and there's plenty of discussion on it, is the cost of many of these bundles was somewhat exorbitant. Now, this bundle that's being featured was $140 normally when you look at the cost of the coins to the in-game currency, and then it was discounted, so it's like an $80. Today, if you buy it, it was $80, and then the discussion around this centered around whether or not it's fair or makes sense to charge people $80 for a bundle or $140 for a bundle, and other creators kind of took they took affront to that, and they objected to the cost, and then others, defended the cost and said, hey, it's a free to play game. The developers got to eat. So it makes sense for them to charge whatever they feel like charging. And they said, a game this good, basically, what's the difference between COD launching for $70 and being a buggy mess, and as this creator put it. And other creators, went on and talked about, got into it. And so it became a big argument. It was a big discussion today and yesterday on the timeline about whether or not it's worth it, whether or not it makes sense, whether it's a good thing to have, these high priced bundles compared to what we've kind of had in the past. So in the past, we've had, Call of Duty has kind of been the standard, right? It's about $20 for an average bundle. Some cost a little more, some cost a little less, depending on what you get. And that's been Call of Duty's bread and butter, going all the way back. Every game, it seems like has bundles, has battle passes, has all these ways to monetize the gaming experience. So why is this a big deal? And why do I think that we're actually right to push back against these really high priced bundles that we're seeing in the game, but not for the reasons that most people are talking about? Most people want to talk about, they want to compare it to Call of Duty, to cost of premium titles, right? Where you buy the title and then you're asked to buy this MTX as you play the game, versus, a free to play game, which is, obviously it's free to play, but the developers got to eat. So they put out bundles, they give you options. And, we're going to assume that none of this affects gameplay, right? This is all cosmetic. So why is this actually a bad thing? Irrelevant of whether you like the game, irrelevant of whether you think Call of Duty is better or this game is better, whether you think developers got to eat so they can charge more because it's free to play versus Call of Duty, which has a premium title on top of Warzone. Take that whole argument and set it aside, because it doesn't matter. That's not what's important. Here's the thing. When you look at how game developers price their content, they're pricing their content in competition to every other developer and every other game out there in their studio or in their genre and outside of it. Okay. And one of the things that really affects the market is the cost of bundles in games. Okay. But it doesn't behave the way that we think a competitive market does. We're used to consumer markets where, competition drives down prices, right? If there are 5 companies making widgets or, 3 bodegas on the avenue, you can't have, one person charge twice as much for the same sandwich that everybody else supplies, right? You can't charge twice as much for the same widget as everybody else charges, because no one's going to buy it. You have to be competitive on price or superior in quality. And when the quality is the same, right, then price is what you compete on. That being said, video games don't operate on that market. They're not a consumer market. Video games operate as a luxury market. The way that video games the pricing in video games works is the same way that Louis Vuitton handbags work. If you can take the cost of materials of making one of those fancy bags that women like to carry around, it's probably going to cost you $35 to manufacture that thing, and that's what they make them for in China. And that's why you can buy knockoffs that are all but identical to the real deal, right? That are available for cheap, right? They visually look the same, and it takes usually a really close inspection to tell the difference. The quality and the cost of materials are about the same because they're made in the same place by the same people. They're just kind of done bootlegged, okay? The cost of the real bag is set by the price that people are willing to pay for it in relation to other luxury bags, right? They're not competing against TJ Maxx. They're not competing against, Sears and Walmart. They're competing against Coach and insert brand here. Okay. They're competing against other luxury brands, and they define themselves by how much people will pay for their product, not how much value the product has in its construction, right? They're not arguing that, we have superior materials, therefore our bag is better. They're saying our name brand is better and we charge more, therefore you get the better bag. That's a luxury market. And video games operate in the same way when it comes to costs. When you look at the pricing of video games, and Nintendo is right now in the middle of driving the new price market, video games all cost about the same, not because there's some agreed upon secret group that meets in a back room and sets the prices. It's because they all have to compete with each other, and they don't compete, or they compete on cost, not value, okay? And so what that means is when Nintendo sets their price at $80 going into this Switch 2 generation, they aren't producing a technically superior game. Their games are 2 generations old. They look like crap, okay? They're barely reasonable to look at. However, they're charging $80, $10 more than your AAA high definition graphics, 4K, whatever, high-end game, right? They're charging more than that, which changes the balance dynamic of games, of the prices of existing games. So now, because of the way that games price themselves, because of this game that they play, the reality is everybody else is going to look at their games and say, well, why is yours so cheap? Why is yours the discount? And that's something that game studios have had to deal with. If they run out and they set and they price their games lower, the consumer generally perceives it to be a lower quality product, right? Why is it so much cheaper? Why is this game only $40? What are you getting? What are you missing? What don't you have? What doesn't work? Is it an indie studio? Are you 4 guys and 4 Muppets in a corner trying to putting a game together? It's going to be buggy and not enjoyable. Are you going to stop supporting it in 5 minutes? These are the questions that consumers ask before they purchase a game. All right. When you set the game at $70, you expect a certain amount of quality. Whether or not that quality gets delivered, it doesn't matter. The reality is, in the consumer, they look at the price and they say, this is a high-end game. This is a top-tier game. I expect the best graphics. I expect the best support. I expect to have bundles. I expect to have all of these things. Okay. If they come out and they release a game, if Black Ops 7 comes out and it's a $40 game, no matter what, it will be looked at and called an add-on to Black Ops 6. Even if it's completely new, even if it stands alone, if it's its own game, started from scratch, right? Which we know it's not. But even if it is, if it's $40, it will never shake the monkey of being an add-on, being a DLC, all right? MW3 suffered from that because it was a full price game, even though everybody expected it to be a DLC. They wanted to pay DLC prices for it. Okay. So this idea of taking bundles, cosmetic bundles, and raising the price up for this game sets a dangerous precedent. And it's one of the reasons why pushing back on this is actually the correct move. And the developers, by the way, to their credit, did retract their prices and brought it down to, I think they're at $40 right now. So W on the community. But the thing that you're trying to avoid, the reason why we should push back on these sort of things is we cannot have an economy in these games, in gaming, where a $40 or an $80, $140, $100 accessory bundle is considered normal, right? That's the problem that Splitgate, that's the door that Splitgate thought about opening. And if consumers, and here's the danger, if consumers looked at that and said, hey, it's $40, you're charging $140 for that, I'll pay it, no problem. Where do you think Call of Duty is going to go? Where do you think everybody else is going to go? Battlefield, when it comes out, you have every other game out there is going to take one look at this and go, oh, consumers will pay $140 for a bundle. Let's make sure we have those. And when you have those kind of numbers, once you get past the initial enjoyment of Splitgate and the launch, the launch utopia, the launch feelings utopia that we're in, you're going to have to drive value at that price point, and that leads to pay to win. Okay? We don't want that. We want bundles to stay cosmetic, optional, and affordable. And that's why pushing back on Splitgate was important, and why getting them to change course was a huge win for not just the game, which I hope it does well, but also for the industry, which now has seen very clearly that people will not, that the gaming consumer in general will not take an $80 bundle, $140 bundle, whatever it ends up being, quietly, right? We're not there. And hopefully we will never get there. So I hope if you're playing Splitgate, I hope you enjoy it. I hope it lasts a long time, gives some change to the BR landscape, drives that market forward. If you don't like it, I hope COD's delivering for you, and everybody else in between. Thanks for watching. Love to hear your thoughts. See you on the next one.